So, about a couple of weeks ago, the Houston Texans made a move that made us all scratch our heads. It's a move that I've repeatedly, completely disrespected on this YouTube channel, and it's a move that I still do not understand, and that was the trading of DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, essentially. And in case if you're wondering, the Texans definitely didn't get additional value in terms of draft picks in that trade either, as they literally had to give up a 2020 fourth round pick in addition to DeAndre Hopkins to get a running back that literally has not been able to start for the Arizona Cardinals. Now, you could make the argument that David Johnson was about to be top 10 in fantasy football rankings if the Cardinals never benched him, but that's despite the point. This is not fantasy football. This is trying to get value for a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. And I feel like ever since then, of course, they got David Johnson, they got a 2020 second round pick and a 2021 fourth round pick from that. But I feel like ever since then, Bill O'Brien has been doing anything he possibly could to make up for a terrible, terrible mistake, because even if David Johnson ends up being like a top 3 running back this year, which the chances of that are slim to none, you still have to answer to the fact that you gave up a top 3 wide receiver and you weren't able to get more capital out of him for giving him away than what you got. And I feel like that's ultimately my biggest issue with the Houston Texans in the past. For example, they also traded for Laramie Tunsil, and the idea of trading for Laramie Tunsil, getting Deshaun Watson, a left tackle, to protect him because he took so many sacks in his first year as a rookie and as a sophomore as well, is genius in of itself. But giving up 2 first-round picks for a left tackle that you're ultimately going to have to give a max contract isn't a good idea. Now we get to the point where we're at today, and first of all, what's going on, guys? Your boy Mikerophone back again with some NFL news. Guys, make sure you take a moment to drop a like, subscribe, and turn notifications on. I'm hoping to become your #1 source of NFL news as it happens. Literally, I was just working on some content for my soccer channel, Flight FC. I saw this come up, and I literally switched gears from soccer mode to NFL mode. So if you want to make sure that you consistently get information, make sure that you drop a like and subscribe. Now, let's talk about why I love this trade for the Los Angeles Rams and why I don't think I really like this trade for the Houston Texans. And it all starts with how the Houston Texans were trying to make up for a terrible move in trading DeAndre Hopkins. Now, in the grand scheme of things, you have to understand that, and this is according to Ian Rappaport, this is a brilliant point by Rappaport. The Texans now have Deshaun Watson, and surrounding him, they have Brandin Cooks, Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, and Kenny Stills. They have Darren Fells, and they have David Johnson and Duke Johnson, which, if you're an offensive genius, you will know how to make this work. If you're a Sean McVay and Andy Reid, you will know how to make this work. But if you ask me, there's so many holes with this offense that I don't even know where to get started. First of all, let's talk about contracts really quickly. DeAndre Hopkins was on your roster, and we could all agree that DeAndre Hopkins is the better wide receiver out of him and Brandin Cooks. They're both 2 completely different types of receivers. Brandin Cooks is more of a speed demon, vertical threat, kind of like a poor man's version of Tyreek Hill in my opinion, whereas DeAndre Hopkins is literally a do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades red zone threat. Red zone threat is what he was coming out of college, but he's evolved into a fantastic route runner and a go-to guy. If you're a quarterback that just wants to chuck the ball up into the air, then you have DeAndre Hopkins on your team. You can literally throw it up to him, hold triangle, aggressive catch, and you'll be good. But if you want to take a look at the books, and this is something that just drives me insane, the Houston Texans had DeAndre Hopkins on their roster, and he was set to count for $12.5 million against the cap, and they decided to trade him away. And then they decided to sign Randall Cobb to this 3-year, $27 million deal, which once again, Randall Cobb is more of a slot wide receiver. He's a wide receiver 3. He's not going to be someone that you could really chuck the ball up to. He's not really that much of a red zone threat, which is fine because every wide receiver has their role. But then they also trade for Brandin Cooks, who is set to count for $16.8 million against the cap. And take a look at Brandin Cooks' remaining contract over here. In 2020, he's set to count $16.8 million against the cap. 2021, again $16.8 million. 2022, it's going to be $17.8 million. And 2023, it's $17.4 million. And It just doesn't make sense. It's not smart management of a football team at all whatsoever. Meanwhile, you have the Los Angeles Rams, which you can't help but feel like they're gearing up for something big here. You see, don't let the stats lie to you. Brandin Cooks has been a very, very productive wide receiver throughout his years in New Orleans, New England, and his first year in Los Angeles. But last year is when things came to a scorching halt. And I believe it was at this point that the Rams figured out that Brandin Cooks isn't going to be someone that you could run your offense through. Rather, he is a wide receiver that you could have and he could contribute to a good scheme. When Todd Gurley is making defenses stay on their tippy toes, and at the same time you have Brandin Cooks and Robert Woods circling around for these decoy jet sweep play actions, then yeah, of course, Brandin Cooks is going to dominate whenever he's left unguarded or undefended in play action sequences. But that wasn't really the case this past season, as Brandin Cooks literally, after his first year with the Rams, putting up 1,204 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, regressed to only posting 2 touchdowns and 583 receiving yards. That's not really good for a guy that's getting paid the amount he's getting paid. So kudos to the Rams for getting out of that contract, because clearly Brandin Cooks wasn't the answer in finding a true number one wide receiver, and he was being paid like a true number one wide receiver. Now, for the Houston Texans, the issue with this trade is very simple, and I don't mean to sound like a Texans hater. I don't want to hate on the Houston Texans. It's just this isn't a trade I would make. The problem is your tallest wide receiver at this point is Will Fuller. He's 6 foot. Then you have the 5'11" Randall Cobb and the 5'10" Brandin Cooks. What kind of offense are you planning on running with this? Furthermore, Brandin Cooks and Randall Cobb fill the same exact role. What kind of offense are you planning to run with all of this? The only possible good thing I see coming out of any of this is literally on the Los Angeles Rams side, for that matter. And that's the fact that I believe that the Los Angeles Rams now cleared up the cap space necessary to either draft a phenomenal wide receiver in this year's NFL draft. By the way, be on the lookout. My mock draft will be coming at you guys tomorrow. But 2 is the fact that, can we just sit back and marvel at what this trade essentially is? Pretty much, the Houston Texans traded away DeAndre Hopkins, the number 57th pick and the 131st pick, to receive Brandin Cooks, a 2020 second round pick, which is the 40th pick in the draft, a 2021st 4th round pick, David Johnson's $11.2 million cap hit, and a 2022 4th round pick. That is a terrible pair of trades. The Houston Texans essentially have to pay more in order to maintain Brandin Cooks and David Johnson, and they had to give up some draft capital as well as giving up a top 3 wide receiver in the entire NFL. And I really just don't understand what offensive scheme they're going to run with a pair or with a couple of 5'10" wide receivers, and their tallest wide receiver being 6 foot, a running back that clearly has had his best years behind him, and a coach that clearly is too occupied with making strange general manager decisions to focus on his job. I really feel bad for Deshaun Watson at this point. Meanwhile, I'm going to talk about my plans for the Rams. I think the Rams are doing a phenomenal job. I know I don't want to get this to be too much of a Houston Texans rant, but for the Los Angeles Rams, I think this is a brilliant move. When they initially signed Brandin Cooks for the amount that they did, I thought that it was a complete overpay. He did show off fantastic stats. He did prove to be an important member of their offense, but they needed something so much more in order for Jared Goff to be successful. And after seeing the way the offense floundered without Todd Gurley last year, and with Brandin Cooks as the main wide receiver, it clearly was apparent to all of us that there's going to be multiple pieces that would have to leave in order to make the Jared Goff, Sean McVay era successful once again. Of course, you could point the finger at the fact that the Los Angeles Rams division was very competitive last year. They had the Seattle Seahawks in that division. They had the San Francisco 49ers in that division. So it was impossible for them to make it to the playoffs. They still finished with a fairly good record, by the way. But you have to also make the argument that now that division is significantly more competitive, and as a result of them being able to be that competitive without a functioning running back that they overpaid, and without their wide receiver, which they overpaid, now they're going to have to double down and become that much better. So if you ask me what I think the Rams are going to do is they're either going to address the wide receiver position in this year's fantastic NFL draft. For all you know, with their draft capital, by the time the Rams get on the board, yeah, of course, I don't think CD Lamb's going to be available. I don't think Jerry Jeudy's going to be available or Henry Ruggs III. But, bro, T. Higgins might be available. Laviska Shenault Jr. might be available. You know, like Denzel Mims could be available. So I feel like the Rams are going to be fine. They're very smart to hit the reset button after going all in on trying to win a Super Bowl while Jared Goff was under a rookie contract. Ultimately, though, I have no freaking clue what the Houston Texans are doing. So maybe you guys can make sense out of this. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think of this trade? I think it's a terrible trade once again for Bill O'Brien. I just from the scheme of things, it seems like Bill O'Brien is that fantasy football player in your league that makes the most trades and always finishes in like 6th place. You know what I mean? I want to get your opinions on this entire topic in the comment section down below. I'm your boy Microphone. I'll catch you in our next upload.